Whether you're thinking about quitting your job, starting a side hustle, or just curious about the realities of being your own boss, this podcast explores the possibilities of being unemployed for a living. So, hey, what's up, everyone? I am Ken.
I'm Cory.
And we are here, second episode of Unemployed for a Living. Man, the first episode was great. It was kind of a transition episode between the former podcast that we did and this kind of new direction that we're going. And
It was received
super
well.
excited. Very well received. Really great comments. Everybody seemed to be excited about what we are doing and the new direction. And so, but we thought, we're looking to gain some new subscribers. And we thought, what a good time to kind of just look back and see how we got to this point. Not necessarily with the podcast, but how we got to be unemployed for a living. So
kind of a reintroduction of sorts. We're reintroducing ourselves to our current viewers, and we're kind of introducing ourselves for the benefit of our new viewers.
Yes, exactly. And we'd like to, grow this podcast, this new direction. And
now, speaking of podcasts, Ken, I looked up today. I was on ChatGPT, and I should probably not be as much as I am, but did you know there's 5 million plus podcasts out there right now?
Really? Wow.
5 million plus. And the average podcast makes it 7 episodes.
Okay. Well,
so I think we have broken some kind of record out there because we have done 130 some episodes and we are still average.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not excelling by any means in the podcast.
We're going to start over at episode 1 and see if we can end at 7 so that we could be. We want to be on the table.
I think we can accomplish that for sure. I think we can get to 7.
No, but in all seriousness, we do. We're not looking to turn this podcast into a business. We're not looking to make a bunch of money, but we would at some point like it to pay for itself. So be in the new direction and kind of a new audience coming in. Anybody that can, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already.
Yes.
And try to share this podcast out on your social media channels or to anyone you think could benefit from what we're talking about. That would help us out an awful lot. So definitely. I had to get that house cleaning out of the way. I'd really like to see the podcast pay for itself. We did. We are professional podcasters. We made money on our first episode.
We did.
Well, we're in the hole, but we did get paid.
We did get, that super thanks.
We got $3.20 some cents after YouTube fees, I think. So we did make a little money on that first episode, and that goes towards the StreamYard fees, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, Cory, we were talking about kind of reintroducing ourselves there, and kind of giving a little bit of our history, not from like kindergarten on up, but what was the
I
point
brought my
when
yearbooks.
kind of the moment that we knew that we didn't want to do a 9-to-5 job anymore, or what those circumstances were, or what kind of like led us down this path, just to kind of give the listeners and the viewers a back history of, what do these guys know? And so, I think that's just kind of a look back before we go forward. So
there you go.
So I don't know, how do we want to start that?
Do you want me to start?
Sure. Cory, why are you unemployed for a living?
Well, primarily because I'm unemployable. Like I'm not a good employee. I'm a horrible employee.
Okay.
But I think mine goes back. Mine goes way back. Like I really have never been a good employee.
Do you have poor work ethic, or you're like
I have amazing work ethic. I have zero tolerance for being bored. No, I'm early. I'm the guy that shows up and makes the coffee. Like I'm always early, but I have zero tolerance for being bored. So as the moment I learn a job, I'm bored with, once I learn it and there's no more room to grow and learn something else at a job.
Yeah.
I cannot sit at a factory and punch a button or sit there and check people out at a cashier. Like once I know how to do it, if you can't teach me anything else, I can't stay. Like my mind wanders and I'm miserable from that day forward. So generally I don't do well as an employee. I have to have the freedom to learn stuff.
No more challenges in the job once you've kind of learned it. Okay.
Yeah. Once they've kind of taught me what they can teach me and there's no more room for advancement, then I can't stay.
You're ready to move on. So have you had like lots of jobs that you've moved on from, or what?
I've had a lot of jobs. I've done everything from carpentry to plumbing and to software development and electrical engineering, like you name it. I mean, I've run the gambit. I've done everything. I didn't deliver pizzas. I worked at a Pizza Hut making pizzas.
Okay.
I've been a mechanic. Like I've done so many jobs, and it's always kind of the same thing. I think if I had to pick one job that made me finally say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore.
Okay.
It was probably when my wife got out of the military and we moved back from Fort Drum to South Dakota. I used to work for my dad for a little while.
Okay.
And in actually
the family business.
I talk about it in ADHD Entrepreneur, my book. We were standing on a bridge in the middle of Chamberlain, South Dakota, and it was about 40 below zero. And
Were you getting ready to jump? Is that what it was?
Well, after this, I would have been. No, I was pumping out porta potties with this homemade honey wagon that Dad made because we ran a porta potty business.
Wait, now you're standing on a bridge, so you're dumping out porta potties into like a public waterway?
No, the honey wagon is like a big propane tank that we built a motor on to make vacuum. So it turned it into a big vacuum cleaner.
Okay.
And we had this big PVC pipe with a giant valve you pull and it sucks everything out of the porta potty.
Yeah.
And then you clean them and fill them back up for the next crew.
Okay.
So we were running those. We bought a bunch of porta potties. We put them together. We were running them. That day, it was like 40 below with the wind chill on that bridge, clear up in the air. So you're up high in the wind anyway. And I pulled that valve and the PVC pipe separated from the valve and everything in that toilet came straight on me.
Oh, no.
I wore the entire contents of that porta potty. And I couldn't get in the truck because Dad wouldn't let me back in the truck. So I was soaking wet, like hypothermic. And he's out there spraying me down with freezing cold, like windshield washer fluid, stuff that doesn't freeze and it's blue.
Yeah.
Just hosing me down with that stuff. And like, that was one of the most miserable days on a job I've ever had.
Well, yeah. So it truly was a shitty day at work.
Yep. And I said on the way home, I'm done taking shit from any job. Never again. And it took me quite a few years after that to figure out how to do it. But I think that's the day I said I'm going to do it.
Going to do it. I'm still lost on why were you on a bridge?
Because they were doing construction on the bridge, so that's where the porta potties were.
Okay. All right. It still sounded like you were getting ready to pump those just into the river. I understand. Okay, I see. The construction site was on the bridge.
Yeah, the construction site was on the bridge. And that was miserable. So I think that's what started the thought process of go do something on your own terms. You know, I think that's really the day it started, but I don't think it was till 2005 until I finally figured some way to do it. And that was
so you had other jobs after that. You had other jobs after that that you went through, and before you decided to work for yourself. Or
I think the last real job I had, and I had several between that, but I think the last real job I had was I went to my father-in-law and I asked him to teach me how to weld. Because I knew how to be a mechanic. I was a mechanic in the National Guard, and I had done mechanic at dealerships, but I never learned to weld. So I asked my father-in-law to teach me how to weld so I could pass a welding test.
Okay.
And I went to work for a place that made trailer suspensions in Sioux Falls, one of the bigger towns in South Dakota. So I started out just as a grunt on the line in a little like cubicle welding suspensions by hand.
Yeah.
And then I learned that job, and I said I needed to learn something new. So I worked my way up through 2 different lines and the brake presses, and then finally to the robot welders running them, and then finally to programming them. And then one day we all came into work, like 100 plus of us came into work and punched in for our shift, and they called a meeting and they sent us all home, and we were all just laid off. The company was going under.
Oh, okay.
So
wait, I think that's kind of a reoccurring theme with people, or why people might get into, either a side hustle or something like that false sense of security of a 9-to-5 job is, you're secure, you learned a skill, you worked your way up, and one day you're just done. And
I think we mentioned in the last episode, like that sense of security, the security that people crave from that 9-to-5. That's what we hear that a lot. Why won't you work for yourself? Well, I like the security of a paycheck from the job.
Yeah.
That security is such a false sense of security. There's no safety net under those companies, no matter how big they are. Like that trailer company was an international company. So, and just one day, 100 people go home. Like there's no real security in a job either. They're being run by people just like us.
Yes.
Flawed people, bad management, like they can go under tomorrow.
Yep.
And that one did. And I think that's what really forced me, because I had a family at the time. I had 2 small kids at home, and my wife Teresa was working at a little grocery store in a small town. And there's 240 people in the town we were living in. There weren't a lot of options.
Yeah.
So we had to pick up and move to a bigger town. And we stayed with her sister for about a month until I could find a plumbing job.
Yeah.
And then I worked that until I could get on my feet enough to start my own business. And I started it was a computer repair business to start with. And I started that with a friend of mine. And I think I started with a friend of mine because I was afraid to do it alone. Like, I didn't have the confidence that I could do it.
Looking for security in someone else again.
And he literally was security. I remember the first time we got stiffed on a job. Like, he's a big, big guy.
Okay.
And we had we did a lot of businesses, work for businesses. Yeah. And we had this little shop on the corner. It was like a little Mexican grocery store.
Okay.
And we fixed their computers for them, and they refused to pay us. So I just had him go down there and talk to them, and then they paid us.
And they paid you right away, huh?
They paid us that day. He just went in and started unhooking computers. So
oh yeah, heck yeah.
He just started taking computers, and they opened the cash drawer and paid him.
And so that was your first kind of experience, that was my being entry. Self-employed.
Yep. And the first partnership, all in one, like a whole ball of mistakes, all in one decision.
And how long did that venture last until you moved to the next thing?
It evolved because it went from that, and then we started doing web design. We started doing web design. I was doing most of the web design. I think I pirated a version of Dreamweaver. Do you remember that program?
I do. Yes.
I think I pirated a version of Dreamweaver with LimeWire. And I started doing web design for companies. But at the time, most local businesses were like, why do we need a website? Like, we don't need this.
Yes, so they didn't understand.
We went out and we started selling the websites. We called the company Carnivore Web Design. We had a big Tyrannosaurus Rex that had a jaw that went like this as a logo.
Okay.
So it was like an animated website with music and the whole thing. Looked like a MySpace page.
Yeah. Oh, man. Shout out to MySpace. Back in the day, yeah. LimeWire, man, the Wild West back then before there was all the securities and...
Oh, that was a good thing, though, because back then LimeWire was our bread and butter. That's everybody downloading LimeWire stuff was just infecting their computers with viruses. So day in and day out, we always had 5 computers on the bench. We were always formatting computers and putting Windows back on them. Like, that was our whole job. And it was a no-brain job. You never had to try and remove a virus. It was just delete the system and reinstall. Yeah. And if they don't have a copy of Windows, you get to sell them a copy of Windows.
Yeah.
So we did okay with that. And we started selling those websites to people. But the more they got technology in their business, the more they needed us.
Yes.
So it kind of evolved over the years. And eventually one of those companies ended up hiring me. That was kind of a breaking point for me because they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They offered a lot of money for me to close my business and come be their admin, be their system admin solely.
Gotcha.
And looking back on it, they never actually mandated that I close the business. Like, I could have kept doing it on the side, but the money they were offering me and the fact that I had at that point 3 kids then, it was just hard to refuse. But we learned so much, or I learned so much from that job. I mean, I learned how to work on servers and got Microsoft certified and Cisco certified and did security on networking and then that developed into my software development, and it just went from there. We were building hardware for vending machines to automate vending machines so that when people went into the big places like the big meat packing plants and stuff, they could use their employee card to buy stuff out of the snack machines.
Okay. Yeah.
So it would payroll deduct it instead of having to have money with them.
Oh, that's cool.
So we helped develop a bunch of that stuff. Like, I mean, there's so much that, like, that was kind of the beginning, and then it just kept going. Every single place I went and every job or business I started taught me a new skill that I could move to the next one.
Because, so you go from the honey wagon to the welding and stuff to that company shutting down. And then you start your own venture,
and I'm sure there was a few jobs There was probably a few jobs in between there too, because I know at one point I stocked shelves at Walmart and unloaded trucks. I mean, there was some jobs between that, but with my own businesses, they really started evolving once I started that computer business.
Yeah.
After that, I kind of had the bug and I knew I could do it.
So you went, though, from having your own business to closing down to going and working again for a company.
I did.
How did you get from out of that company to, say, is that where your current situation of being employed? What happened there that
they gave me a ton of freedom not to get bored in that job. So I stayed for a few years. I think I was there for like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
But they gave me the freedom. Like if I came in one day and said, I'm no longer your system admin, I don't want to do it, hire a new guy. I'm going to start building a time clock system for you and learn how to develop software, which is what I did. Like I literally came in one day and said, I'm not your system admin anymore. I'm not doing it. I'm going to start being your software developer. They didn't have a software developer. They had no need for one.
Okay.
So I just kind of created that role and they let me do that.
Okay.
Which was, so I got to learn more skills there. And eventually I did run out of growth opportunity there. And the travel, they had me traveling all over the country.
Okay.
And I didn't care for that. So it kind of made the decision easier to jump back in to my own business. So at the time, my thought was I can always go back to System Savers, which was my computer company.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I did. I rebranded that and I went back to that in a different aspect. I was more server side then. More server and software integration side.
So now you're back to being self-employed.
At that point, yep.
Okay. And then is that the last time you worked for anybody or?
Trying to think. I think that was the last time I worked for anybody is when now I've worked closely with companies, but it's always been under my own flag since then. Because once I started my own computer company back up, I started doing a lot of server work and stuff, and I got tied into a lot of companies at much higher management levels.
Yeah.
And one day we were in this guy's shop and the owner of the company was in there and he kept talking about what they would like to do with their company. And I got to hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
And one day they were talking about they wanted to design this piece of electronic device that doesn't exist anywhere. You can't buy it.
Okay.
They want to try and figure out how to design it. But they needed a piece of software that it could talk to. And that didn't exist. So they had to find somebody to build it. And I had no idea how to do any of that.
Yeah.
I knew just enough that I kind of understood the conversation. But before I left the building that day, I decided to take a chance. So I went into the owner's office and I said, I heard you talking and I heard what you said you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Write me a check for $100,000 and give me 6 months and I'll do it.
Okay.
And he did. He wrote a check.
Really?
Yes, he did.
Really? And did you get the software? Did you get it done?
It's in 7 countries now, the hardware and software. They still use it today.
Really?
Yep.
So was it that $100,000 that was their rights to your software, or do you own rights?
No, that was their prototype.
Okay.
That was just for me to build a prototype, and they still had no one to build them. So that evolved into a manufacturing company for myself and Teresa at that point, because now that I had designed it, we had to design circuit boards, we had to figure out the electronics, we had to figure out communication protocols, we had to figure out how to run RF between essentially it was a big torque wrench on the end of a crane that connected to giant valves. And they wanted to read the pressure in the lines and on the valve as the torque wrench turned, and then report it to a piece of software that was miles away in an office. Okay. So we had to figure that out, and we did. And then once we knew how to build them, they would contract us to build them as they sold them. So we were the manufacturer, they were selling our products.
Gotcha.
And that went on for quite a while, to the point where we were buying components to build that. Like we had to make them waterproof because they were being used by fire hydrants and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that there'd be water raining down on these things the whole time they used them.
Okay.
So we were buying these waterproof enclosures, and of course, me being me, I was like, I'm tired of buying these. Why don't I just buy a full-on CNC plasma table that doesn't even fit in my garage?
Yeah.
And make my own enclosures, become a metal manufacturer.
Yeah.
So we did that.
Wow. That's like, see, I haven't even heard a lot of this stuff, but most of the people in our audience know you as a reseller. Yep. At what point, or what led to you getting up to where, people might
You want me to jump
know what you're
ahead?
doing now. Yeah, jump. Oh, well, no. Hey, if there's more of this just gripping, exciting
That's what I mean.
history.
We could do like this whole episode. Just we're at 23 minutes. We're not even to 2010 yet.
And we still get to talk about me, which is what, hey, stick around, folks. You'll get to hear about me here soon.
Ken's here too.
But
no, there was a lot of evolving after that yet. I mean, it went down.
Okay.
I'll give you the short version. Once we started manufacturing the metal parts, I found that my welding skills from when I left my other job kind of came into play, and I had learned how to run brake presses. So I knew I had the skills to do it. So we did that for a while. And then I started making metal art, the cool metal art signs and stuff you see hanging on walls. So we did that for quite a while, and we sold a lot of those. Matter of fact, all the high schools, like in a whole 3-county area around here, have a giant 12-foot sign that we made hanging in the high school.
Cool.
And
a legacy that'll last.
That ended up going, geez, where did we even go with that? Because that was, we went through that stuff. And then as we tried to get the metalwork business published out there and advertise it to get more business, we decided to put up a website to do that, which kind of got me into the web world again.
Okay.
And we had to learn how to market. And I couldn't figure it out. Like, I was spending money and I wasn't going anywhere marketing, and it was all just local customers. Eventually I bought a course on marketing, and the course was actually not about marketing at all. It was about drop shipping.
Okay.
But they had a marketing section that looked really good. So I bought the whole course. I think I spent $600, and I learned the marketing side. And as soon as I got good at the marketing, I couldn't keep up with the metal shop anymore. Like, it had outpaced us. We had to shut it down. And then I kind of had the realization, if I just stop selling my crap and sell somebody else's, like the dropship course tells me, then I can market as much as I want and sell as much as I want and never have to touch it.
Okay.
So we did that, and that evolved into our e-commerce business. And we went through 3 or 4 of those. We ended up with our largest one being Shop Tiny Houses. Ironically, we sold toilets. So I was back in the shitter business again.
So kind of almost full circle. One of the things that I've been noticing is in some of our talks about things is how you gain a skill at one place and you take it to the next thing, and you learn and you build and you evolve, and then you can call back. It was years later, it sounds like, where you went back to that welding skill that you had, and that welding skill in that thing went back to the software design. So everything is all intermixed. And
a lot of that played in, even on the website when we started the drop shipping. A lot of that software development, web design, that came into play again.
Yeah.
So we ended up building that into I think the year that we sold our drop ship store, the toilet store, it was doing about $2.2 million in sales a year.
Wow.
So it was doing really well. South Dakota versus Wayfair tax law came along, and it kind of crushed a lot of online businesses, a lot of small guys like we were.
Okay.
So rather than shut it down,
2.2 million doesn't sound like a small guy.
Oh, we were small fish. We were very small fish. But rather than shut it down, we decided to start doing something smart. And rather than just throwing businesses away and quitting them, we decided to explore selling businesses.
Okay.
So we sold that one, and we sold it for a good price. It was mid 6 figures, and it gave us enough to take a step back and decide what we wanted to do. And we had 2 years to do it without worry.
Yeah.
And still maintain our current standard of living where we were. And in those 2 years, we started a few other businesses, but the one that most people are familiar with me is that's when we finally decided to jump into the eBay reselling. We were very familiar with selling online already.
Yeah.
So the e-commerce stuff was it was kind of a no-brainer for me, but we had never handled selling our own product and shipping like you do on eBay.
Yeah.
And it looked intriguing, and I decided to learn as much as I could. So I started watching YouTube videos and figured it out. And we went to a Goodwill one afternoon and just stopped in, and I found a little baseball bobblehead. And I don't even remember what it was, but that was the first thing we ever bought.
Okay.
Was that bobblehead. And we put it online, and it sold for $109 before we got back home.
Really?
And that was it. We were hooked. We were in.
Especially because then it made it seem like, man, this is easy. You just go to the thrift store, you buy something, you list it. I think that was, to list it right there. We bought a
ton of garbage when we decided to go full steam. We gave ourselves $1,000 budget.
Yes.
I actually sold an old Dodge Charger I had out here that I had been working on. and we took $1,000 and that was our budget, and we blew 900 of it. So there was some learning curve.
Bad inventory and
just not knowing what we were doing. We made the same mistakes everybody that's going to start doing eBay reselling makes. We just made them really fast.
Okay. Well, I like that. We were talking about that the other day, and I had mentioned to you how I thought that was cool in your story, because I've heard that before, how you decided we're going to go down this path, and we have this old car that's just sitting there. We're going to sell this for $1,000 and use it to start our business. And it's like, wow, not everybody can start if you're doing any sort of thing, whether you're going to go into reselling, you're going to do any sort of side hustle, and you got to determine, what that budget is, if there is a budget that you're going to put in it.
That was the most amount of money I had ever started a business with. I've never started a business with a budget like that.
And when I said, man, you had that $1,000, and your response to me was, that was the worst thing. You would have rather had $100.
We would have done it way better.
Yeah, you would have made a lot better decisions rather than, you had all that capital to start, and you just kind of...
keeps you scrappy. If you have no money, it keeps you scrappy. Yeah. Like you pinch your pennies and you're real conservative about what you blow money on. When you have $1,000 to start, the scrappy goes away. Yeah. You're like, oh, I got money. We'll just go do it.
Well, I think that's, a little bit of a teaser here, though, making those sorts of good decisions that we're going to be talking about that, probably next episode, I think. Or something along those lines. So stick around. So making those decisions and is an exciting prospect of what's a good decision and what's not a good decision. Well, everybody has a different perspective or a different place that they're coming from. So those decisions are going to be
how to handle decisions when you don't have a boss over your shoulder doing those decision making.
Yes,
doing the decision making for you.
Yes,
like that's a big thing to break away from.
Oh, it is, for sure.
So how about you, Ken?
Well,
now that I've taken a whole episode, and I will say one last thing. Like it's almost a running joke when I have conversations with people and they start talking about something, and I'll be like, I used to do that. Like, I used to do everything, and it's because I'm a horrible employee.
Because you're okay. Well, but you're a great being self-employed, maybe. I mean, if you don't learn, if you do everything perfect, you didn't learn anything. And obviously you wouldn't have went through all these different things if there either wasn't a new opportunity or you were able to build on something that you've already done.
Even in high school, I think my favorite TV show, and I know I've mentioned it before, was The Pretender. And I think you said you didn't remember that show at the time, but The Pretender, he was just a guy that would go and solve crimes and stuff, but he could jump into any job and learn it in like 5 minutes. He'd just get a book and read it, and he'd be a surgeon. Like, for some reason in high school, I related to that guy so much. I was like, that's me. Like, I'm a pretender. I think my light just went out.
I seen that. It's
a little dark in here now. We'll see. Does that help?
Okay, so where did I start? Okay. Well, contrastly, to Cory, I've had 3 jobs in my lifetime. I started out working a grocery store and, stocking shelves, cleaning in the meat room, that sort of stuff, whatever hours I could get as a young 16-year-old kid, that wanted to have a car to drive around and go have some fun. And, but also I was still in high school at that point, and I had went to school, to learn the graphic arts or the printing trade. And so I went after I had graduated school, or actually they had a work program where you go to school half a day, do all your academic stuff, and then you could go to work.
Was it for like school credit?
Yeah, you still got school credit, but it was a paid job. It was a paid position. But that's what they were training you for. So I worked at an engineering firm. They had an in-plant print shop that would print all of their form work that they used in the shop and for record keeping and everything, plus literature and marketing materials and stuff like that. They would print in this print shop, and I was actually the sole employee back in that area. And
the indentured servant?
Yes, pretty much, which it was great because I could do I could just do whatever I wanted. No, nobody else in the building knew anything about my job or what I did. So I could just, they didn't know if I was really working or not. But I had tasks that I had to get done. So I was getting stuff done. From there, I got a call back from one of the instructors at the vocational school where an employer had called into the school to see if they had a student or somebody that could come and work. And well, they sent me, even though I had been graduated and out of school. It's like, hey, I think this is a good opportunity
Must
for
have made
you.
An impression.
And yeah, and I didn't really have they didn't really have a student that would fit well for that. Plus it was over in another town, and for the students to have to drive over there, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah. So I went over and I got interviewed, got that job, and started as just a pressman, and I worked there for 32 years. So that was my third.
Was there a lot of progression in that job, or did you pretty much do the same things?
There was a lot as far as I ended up, I started as a pressman and ended up as the general manager, the overall manager of 4 locations that grew. The company grew over the years from the single location into 4 location. And a lot of that due to me and my willingness to learn new skills, learn new stuff. At the end, there was not a position.
I'm glad you're still humble.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, hey, I gotta, I gotta call it like it is. It's, because the owners at the time, the original owners were an older couple. And so they relied on, people. And I had that drive and that ambition to take it from, really old school printing and bring computers in and bring technology.
So you're saying you're a good employee.
I'm an excellent employee for somebody. And
I've heard rumors that you did some side gig work too, though.
Okay.
Didn't you play in a band? Did you ever get paid for that?
Some, just, a little bit, mostly garage band, a few parties and that sort of stuff here and there. But I played drums in what was like back in the day, like a hair metal band playing, a lot of either classic rock tunes or the hits of the day. But with the heavy metal
in the 50s?
Player to it. Yeah, way back when I was this was like
when we were young sprouts,
mid to late 80s. Okay, we'll say that. So that 80s hair metal,
the good hair
stuff
band
is what we played. Yeah, oh yeah, the good stuff. But I did go from that. While I was still employed at my regular place, I used to do band management then at that point.
Okay.
Once I was done, I also did when I was done with the band, I owned all of the equipment because I had a guy that was when I first started out that told me the more of the equipment that you can own or that you have, the more say you have in something. And and so my last band situation was the band wanted to go one direction and I wanted to go a different direction. We weren't going to agree on that, so I just took all my equipment and I went
nobody's
home.
playing with my toys.
And then they never continued. Some of the guys did and went on to play in some successful stuff. But I did take all of that equipment and I did some DJ work. Then I would do, parties and weddings and taste. All of that stuff. So yeah, back then I would do all of that stuff. But while I was still employed by someone else.
So there were more side gigs then.
So yeah, there were side gigs, side hustles. Yeah, I did. And so kind of jumped to the end 32 years later, and I'm the manager there of all of these locations. And there was a change in ownership. Well, there had been a change in ownership like 20 years before. And, I worked my way through that because the new owners they're like, hey, we need help. We need, whatever.
Sure.
Stay around, do all of this. And the new owners, basically what it was is their daughter worked for the company and they had the means. And so they bought their little princess a print shop so that she could play grown up.
It's a horrible gift.
And well, yeah, it is. These days it is.
Gift.
And so the very first day of them coming in, I mean, literally in the first introduction, hey, you know, blah, blah, blah. Hi, we're such and such. And we've heard a lot about you. We're really looking forward, you know, to working with you, but we're going to change up, you know, the position of our daughter. She's going to be doing this, this, and this. And I'm thinking, hey, that sounds a lot like what I do. That's my position. And so
that's funny. I'm going to have a coworker.
Exactly. So that was on a Thursday. And it just so happened that I had already had that Friday scheduled off for a vacation day. But I went home and I really thought about it. And I looked at my finances to see what I could do. I've always been pretty stingy and miserly with my money. I don't waste a lot of it. And so I looked at my finances. I decided that I didn't want to work in that situation anymore, but I had no future plan. I had no thing that I could move into. So
you were just done.
Yes. And so I went in that next Monday morning, and I talked to the new owners, and I said, you know, I just don't really feel that this situation is going to work for me. And we parted company right then. I had no plans in my life of working for myself. I would have probably retired, because the job, you had talked about how when something was no longer a challenge, you would want to move on. This industry every day was some sort of a new challenge, basically because of due dates and just, you know, we went from old style presses to, by the time that I had left, we were full digital. We no longer put ink on paper. It was all digital, you know, and built to that. So there was always challenges. I liked the people that I worked with. I liked the community that we were in and our customer base. And I probably would have retired from there, still been there, except for this situation that comes up. And again, I think it's relatable to a lot of people that companies,
we're
change.
So different. We're so different in that. Yeah. Even if the industry had changed year after year through one of my jobs, just going into the same building with the same community and the same people. And
yeah,
I think the monotony of that would have had me moving on too. Like I do think there's two kinds of people. There's people that can do a career, and then there's people that have to be reinventing all the time, like just personality types. I think we're on opposite ends of that.
Oh yeah, because I'm definitely a career guy. I mean, I would have still been there. So I left with no plan, and that was knowing that I had the means to sustain me for a while. And I had decided I'm not going to do anything until the first of the year, which this was like 2019 that I had left. I believe it was August. And so I'm not going to do anything. I've worked 30, my whole career, 35, 36, 37 years already. I'm going to take a break for a little bit, and I'll decide in January, which seemed like forever. It's August, September. Well, all of a sudden I woke up one day and it's like, oh no, it's January. What am I going to do with my life? And I had to start, making some of those decisions. And where the path that I went down at that point, I had some friends that also did reselling, and just talking with them, over the years, and we go here and we buy this and we do this and we sell it for all this money on eBay and on Amazon and on all these places. And I got to talking to one of them one day, and it's like, I think I'm going to give that a try. And I went on YouTube and I said, or on Google actually,
the old YouTube.
How do I sell on eBay? And it brought up some videos that brought me to kind of the YouTube reselling community. And I just started to watch, and I just started to suck up all of this knowledge before I bought my first thing. My first thing that that I bought, because I started with trying to sell things from around the house, but the very first thing that I did sell was a pair of Nike baseball cleats that I had bought at the thrift store that's right around the corner. I had bought them for like $1 or something. I listed them, and it took like, I don't know, almost 2 weeks. I had listed some other stuff and been before I got that first like sale, and it was those cleats, and they sold for like 17 or 18 bucks, and I had paid like $1 for them. And it's like, oh yeah, that's it. Well, because I'm looking around and my phone, I get this cha-ching, and it's like, well, that's a new sound. What? I never heard that before. What is it? And I look, and it's like, I actually sold something. And then
it's kind of a party that first time, ain't it?
Exactly. And then I was hooked from there in reselling, and so I've been doing that ever since then, and growing that, working for myself. And the more that I do, the less I ever want to go back and work for somebody.
Is there anything about working 9 to 5 that you miss?
A couple of things. I guess I do miss that structure. Actually, being employed for myself, I work more than I would than 9 to 5. In the 9 to 5 world, you get up, you go there at a certain time, you go home at a certain time, and the rest of the day and the time is yours. You don't have to. Now, however, being management, my brain still went all evening about, how things were going to go. But the worries about the next day weren't mine, or the finances of the business weren't mine. I got my paycheck, and it was the owner's worry about that sort of stuff. If employees were going to leave, if somebody was going to show up that day, if an order didn't come in of shipment or supplies or something like that. That was, although it was my job to coordinate that stuff, it really wasn't my worry. The other thing that I guess that I miss in that 9 to 5 is fellow employees, is just working with people, having, telling different stories. Because, at your 9 to 5, you're not working like all day long. Some of the time you're just chit chatting, with people
most
or whatever. Or if you're, and it's so I miss having other people around, because the current job that I'm doing in reselling, it's just me. I'm doing all of it, and I'm just here by myself. And so, those are the things.
I think I could walk into any high school in the country right now and pick out the kids that would make good entrepreneurs versus the ones that wouldn't, that'll work a long-term job like you did.
Yeah.
Not to say that you wouldn't make a good entrepreneur. I'm just saying that the personality traits will lend more towards going to that job, and those that don't. I mean, you go in and look for those C and D students. Those are your future entrepreneurs every time.
Well,
they really are. Like when I was in high school, I refused to fail because I have some competitive side to me. So I wasn't going to fail, but school also drove me nuts. I wasn't going to apply one more bit of effort than I had to. Because my mind was elsewhere all the time. And those C and D students are the ones that go out there and build companies. Like every time it's those kids. Now the ones that are failing, they're a different. If you're just getting Fs and failing out, that's one thing. And the people that are doing the B and C students, those are the ones. Those are career kids. Like they learn to be good employees.
And I was, near the top of my class in the top third National Honor Society, 4.0 grade average in the end. I was
if
a good student.
If they had a D minus, I would have been there. Like I skimmed by every class I took because I hated it. Like the maximum days of school you could miss, that's how many I missed. I moved out of my mom and dad's house for my senior year, and the principal used to live down the street from me, and he would drive by my house on his way to school, and he'd come in and get me out of bed and say, "You only got 2 days left you can miss. Get up."
Yeah, I've never had that. I miss, I guess, that structure and that not having the responsibility. Now every decision that I make, it's mine, which is very freeing, but it's also, right or wrong, it's on me. And I think that's one of the directions.
Yeah, making that decision is what stops a lot of people from doing their own thing. It's
Yes.
I mean, we help my wife's sister get into reselling as a side gig. She still has a normal job, but being able to say, what can I, like, somebody wants to do a return. What do I do? Like the panic and the just freezing up and not making that decision.
Yes.
I think that keeps a lot of people out of being their own boss because they don't want that responsibility and they're not good at mitigating those risks and taking those decisions onto themselves. And I think that's what our whole next episode's on.
Yes. Yes. And it doesn't, again, we've talked, that we're resellers because that's where we're at, but it doesn't matter in any position or anything that you're going to do with being self-employed.
You know what I feel about this episode? I feel like maybe I'm an oversharer.
A little bit. I felt the same way.
And I only got about half my history out there, but I feel like that was a lot. I have to go do some self-reflection now because that's...
Yeah, but it just shows the diversity of the types of stuff you did. And what I took away from that was how you built on everything. You used skill sets from everything. And one of the things that we've been talking about here and the direction that we're going with this is making people think about, well, I don't have any skills. I can't be self-employed. I can't do this.
I used to really...
And you do have skills. Every job that you have, everything that you've done, there's a skill set in that. And
I really used to beat myself up about that. In my younger years, I felt like I was flaky and I kind of beat myself up about it.
Yeah.
What's your job this week type of thing. But I don't look at it that way anymore. Like it really was a progression. It was a bunch of steps that led to the next thing every single time.
Yes.
I don't think one of the jobs I've had didn't teach me something.
Yeah. Didn't teach you and help you make that decision to do the next thing.
Well, the toilet helped me get real definitive.
Yeah. As soon as you're covered in human waste, it's
like white hot rage will make a decision quick. Well, in this episode, I learned once again, we are diversely different creatures. Like you and I
for sure
are nothing alike.
Not one bit. Not one bit.
And we're going to use that. We're going to use that here. So we're going to test each other.
We went back on this episode. Yeah, it was kind of just a little bit more of a history about us, where we come from, how we got to be where we're at now. And we had to make decisions along the way. And so, that decision and getting over those fears and making that decision is where we're going next week. So join us next week, and that's what we're going to do. Yeah, like, subscribe, pass this along, share it out. We greatly appreciate it. And we will catch you next week on Unemployed for a Living.